Today is Monday, June 8, 2026. This is a quick start from CBN News. I'm Dan Andros. Iran strikes Israel with rocket attacks. We'll have that top story and more on today's podcast, where we bring you news from a Christian perspective. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a rating. You can email us your thoughts, quickstartpodcast@cbn.org. Glad you're here with us, getting through the news of the day. We're here each and every weekday, bright and early. With me today, CBN's Billy Hallowell. A lot to get to, as always, on the podcast. On the focus story, David Rives, founder of Wonders Center and Science Museum, sees something disturbing surrounding the debate over UFOs and aliens.
Yeah, we're going to get into that, sort of the balance between science and religion and some of the things he's seeing as a Christian, so we'll break that down today.
All right, looking forward to the details there. Coming up in just a moment. Also on the main thing, the cost of raising a family keeps climbing. A new report says Washington's spending habits making it worse. Madison Seals has more coming up on the main thing. All right, I want to tell you about our sponsor, this podcast, Christian Solidarity International. We're going to have an update this week coming up from CSI from Nigeria, because as we've been talking consistently here, Nigeria is just out of control at this point. It is the number one spot for Christians to be persecuted and killed for their faith. And the situation is dire, and so we're going to get an update from Hassan John from CSI coming up this week. But the work they're doing on the ground is critical, and they need your help in order to keep that work going. And if they're going to be there for the long haul, they need support to be there for the long haul. So if you feel like you want to walk alongside CSI and their efforts that they're doing, that they're freeing these people from modern day slavery, they're helping families recover from attacks and devastated families when they lose a loved one or when someone's missing or whatever the case might be, they're there for the long haul, and they need help to do that. And you can go to csi-usa.org/quickstart and do just that and help. So csi-usa.org/quickstart. Any amount helps. You can be the hands and feet of Jesus. CSI, fantastic organization, longtime sponsor of the Quick Start program. And there's a reason why we do that, and that's because they do fantastic work and giving you an opportunity to directly help persecuted Christians in need. All right, going to go to the news in 90 seconds now, and Middle East tensions are flaring again after Iran launched multiple missile barrages at Israel, prompting air raid sirens and sending civilians into shelters across the country. Israel says most of the missiles were intercepted and quickly responded with strikes on targets in western and central Iran, including military and defense infrastructure. The exchange comes as President Trump pushes for a nuclear deal with Tehran, warning that further escalation could derail negotiations that he says are close to completion. Iran called its missile attacks a warning and threatened broader retaliation against U.S. and Israeli interests if additional strikes occur. Meanwhile, concerns are growing about the economic fallout with rising energy prices and fears that a prolonged conflict could impact global oil markets and the U.S. economy heading into the midterm elections. And hundreds of Christians trapped in modern-day slavery in Pakistan are finding freedom thanks to a growing effort led by some American believers. Bonded labor remains a major problem in Pakistan's brick-making industry, where families can become trapped by debt for generations. Some estimates suggest up to 1 million Christians are affected. Idaho resident Aaron Hutchings and Project Jubilee founder Emmanuel Hernandez are a couple of those fighting those efforts. Speaking to Fox News, they talked about how they've helped free hundreds of laborers by paying off debts and helping families secure housing. Those are just some of today's top headlines. You can check out more stories over at cbnnews.com. And Billy, talking about the work CSI is doing, and then I saw this reporting today about Christians in Pakistan being essentially trapped because they're so looked down on in Pakistan. It's really shocking. It's basically second-class citizens to be a Christian in Pakistan, and there's just very little enforcement of these sorts of things. And so it just underscores the type of work that those gentlemen are doing, and then, of course, our sponsors CSI are doing. I mean, it's just sad to see Christians being persecuted like this around the globe, but in areas like Pakistan, like Nigeria, it is shocking the levels to which it happens.
You know, what's wild is that these persecution issues, they're the worst they've ever been. And you would think, oh, okay, it's 2026, things are going to get better, but they don't get better. Every year it gets worse, even with technology, even with all the advances that we have. And so we need organizations like this and like CSI to be doing what they're doing, because again, the problem's only worsening.
Yeah, it is. Definitely need to be praying about it. Make it something you're praying for every day, because, again, when I've been in regions of the world where there are Christians being persecuted like this, like against ISIS, where I've been in the Middle East to see that firsthand, what they often ask for first is prayer. And that is something we all can do right from wherever we're at. And so make sure you continue to keep persecuted Christians on your prayer list. All right, going to go to the focus story now. And David Rives, as I just mentioned there, is seeing something pretty disturbing in the debate over UFOs and aliens. Tell me about this.
Yeah, this one is really interesting. He is the founder of the Wonders Center and Science Museum out in Dixon, Tennessee, and he really believes that the most disturbing part of this conversation centers on people's decision to believe science over God. You know, he said, look, I've seen things through telescopes for years, on many sleepless nights through large observatory class telescopes I can't explain. But just because I can't explain it doesn't mean that it wasn't a satellite breezing past the eyepiece, or it wasn't a government experiment, or whatever the situation might be. He said, beyond that reality, there's really a bigger problem, right? And that is that people are relying, again, on science over God. He said, when we start talking about alien life and the existence of extraterrestrials and all these new breaking reports that are coming out, what concerns me is that as a Christian, I'm seeing this trend where we tend to believe the scientific world more than we believe what our Bible or our Christian faith tells us. You know, he said that he's worried that people might be willing to believe that narrative and the narrative that aliens are real and that Christianity can be rejected over the biblical narrative. And he said, that is what I see coming right around the corner and influencing millions of young people, especially your children and your grandchildren. So really, it's, you know, I think it's a simple issue that is not new, but because of the nature of this, you know, alien discussion, it has him increasingly concerned.
And what does he say Christians must understand about science?
Well, he said, look, he's like, Christians have to take a stand and embrace the reality that creation points back to a creator and a divine designer. And he said, that's just something that's implicit in the facts. He said, when you look at astronomy, when you look at biology, when you look at genetics in our DNA, it seems to point to a grand engineer, but more than just an engineer, the God of the Bible, who basically said that he wrote a book inside of you before you were ever written. And he talked about like the genetic code. He said, your genetic code was made before you were even written by God, the God of the Bible. And so really just wanting Christians to approach this from a God perspective first, rather than a science perspective first. The science comes along with it. There's no conflict. But the assumption that you can believe these people who, you know, are atheists or agnostic or are focused on the obsession over the existence of aliens, he said that is something that we need to not be engaging in.
And what is most notable about Rives Wonders Center and Science Museum?
Yeah, so what's interesting, you know, obviously he's out there talking about this stuff, but this Wonders Center and Science Museum, a lot of people don't know. I mean, a lot of people do know about it, but some people do not know what they're doing. And it's pretty interesting because it's very similar. It reminds me of what Ken Ham is doing in Kentucky. This, again, is in Dixon, Tennessee. But it's a Christian museum. And, you know, we visited there not too long ago. Pretty cool space. They've got artifacts. They've got science. It comes all from a biblical perspective in this beautiful location that they have. They just opened the Wonders of the Sea. It's Wonders of the Sea, Oceans of Awe. That's their aquarium that opened on May 26th. And they've got all sorts of hands-on activities there. They also are doing the Wonders of Creation Conference, and that is from June 10th to the 12th, where they bring in all these experts in physics, geology, biology from all over the country from a biblical perspective to talk about science and faith. And so these are just some of the things they're doing. And people can find out more about that at wonderscenter.org.
I love it. I love that Christians are doing this and not shying away from science, because as you said, so many times an issue is that people treat science as God. It's like they'll say, well, science explains this, as if somehow science invented something, or science is the thing that is creating all of this stuff. And it's like, absolutely not. All science is the study of what God made. And so it's great to see people combine science and not shy away from science, not be afraid of it, because really we shouldn't be. All it is taking a look at what God has made and learning about it.
Yep. And that is the key, understanding that. I think people have created this false, narrative that there's a massive debate between these things. And by doing that, have really done a disservice to our understanding.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, appreciate you bringing that one to our attention today. Always great to see a Christian and a Christian organization making something here to point us to God and to show the truth of what God has made and what God continues to do. So appreciate you bringing that one to the podcast today. And we're going to go to the main thing now. And the Heritage Foundation has released a new report outlining spending reforms. It says could lower costs for families and restore a more family-friendly economic agenda. Madison Seals spoke with Dan Kowalski, director of the Center for the Federal Budget at Heritage, about where lawmakers could reasonably start. That conversation is today's main thing.
The Heritage Foundation just released a new report called Setting the American Opportunity Agenda that covers topics ranging from making healthcare more affordable to defunding Planned Parenthood. And the process to make this happen is through budget reconciliation and reorganizing where our money is flowing. Dan, before we get into more details about the report, can you speak to how that process works?
Sure. Thank you for having me, Madison. Now, the reconciliation process is a Senate rule that allows legislation that affects spending or revenues or the debt limit to pass the Senate with 51 votes, avoiding a filibuster. And the Senate right now is working through a reconciliation bill 2.0, as we're calling it, to fund the Department of Homeland Security, the Customs and Border Protection, and Immigration and Customs Enforcement, which the Democrats would not fund through the regular order. So Congress has used two reconciliation bills so far in the Trump administration, one to pass the One Big Beautiful Bill last year, which was enacted on the 4th of July, and one they're currently working through to pass a completion of the appropriations measures for the current fiscal year for border enforcement. And what we're advocating for at Heritage is that Congress work on a third reconciliation bill, which is spun off in a regular order budget process to start to make a dent in the deficit and do things that will reduce costs to Americans, reduce interest costs to the government. And it's something that we should do while we still have Republican House, Republican Senate, and President Trump in the White House.
Yeah, and one of the main focuses of the report is in response to, as you mentioned, the increasing cost of living that makes it difficult for working Americans to live comfortably. So can you talk about some of the spending reforms that would make the cost of living more affordable, or at least that be the goal?
Yeah, well, I'd say some of the most immediate changes you would see would come from our healthcare transparency provisions. Currently, if you shop and you find a provider who will give you like an MRI for a different price or a lower price than what you may be able to get it through your insurance company, the insurer takes the money and you don't get any reward for actually doing anything to reduce the costs of your care. Well, we're proposing that you be able to get that difference tax-free, and that if you want, you can put it into your health savings account so that you have money for later. Similarly, employers right now don't see what they're paying for their employees' individual services. So they should be able to negotiate better prices for their employees, and those things should bring down the cost of health insurance. We have some anti-fraud provisions in there by reducing the cost of food stamps by doing matches of identity matches and asset matches against people who claim food stamps, which right now states don't do that. We're going to require them to do that. That would bring more money into the federal government, which will reduce the cost of our borrowing and affects interest rates for consumers. Similarly, one of our bigger reforms is to stop the Federal Reserve from paying interest on idle money that banks keep at the Federal Reserve. We spend $100 billion a year paying banks interest on money that they're not actually at risk for at all. And it's something that happened in 2008 during the last financial crisis, and we're advocating getting rid of that. It will return the Federal Reserve to profitability, and it will reduce, again, costs to the government, lowering interest rates, and importantly, it will also make more money available for lending to small businesses, all of those things which would lower interest rates. So those are a few of the ways that we would put policies in place that would reduce consumer costs in the future.
And this report also offers guidelines or suggestions for the current administration to consider putting into place that reflect a very pro-family agenda. Can you speak to that and why the family is such a foundational part of our economy and society?
There is no doubt that a child born in a loving two-parent environment is going to do better than a child born in a one-parent or absent parent environment or raised by their grandparents or foster care, right? And we as a country spend huge amounts of money in order to support broken homes, children from broken homes and broken homes. What we're saying here at Heritage is, let's take some of the savings that we're getting from paying interest to foreign banks and instead direct that money to Americans who have children and who want to marry and have children, but, need a little assistance in being able to have the resources they need to establish their home. So we're proposing something called a nest account, which is very similar to the Trump accounts that were enacted last year in the One Big Beautiful Bill. And the government would provide $2,500 in seed money for every child of a family with at least one U.S. citizen. We put that money into an account. It builds over time. Parents can contribute to it. Employers could contribute to it. And that money is available to the child when they turn 18. And if they marry between 18 and 30, they get to withdraw some of those funds, a third each year, in order to be able to do things like buy a house or have the funds available so that the mother can take time off from work and take care of the child when they're first at home. So we think this kind of thing will, over time, promote a higher birth rate and promote more stable families. The other policy that I think we need to mention is defunding of Planned Parenthood. We call for in our reconciliation bill a continuation of the defunding of Planned Parenthood that was in the One Big Beautiful Bill. Last year, we stopped funding for 1 year. It's kind of ironic, I guess, actually, that under current law, the federal government will start paying for abortion again on July 4th of 2026, the 250th anniversary of the country, and we're going to start paying for abortions again. 435,000 roughly abortions last year through Planned Parenthood. That's another big reason why you need to do a reconciliation bill now so that you can continue that defunding of Planned Parenthood and other abortion providers, and do other things that can promote future healthy families in the U.S.
All right, Madison, appreciate that. conversation, and we are going to have time on the podcast today for one last thing.
We got Romans 1:20, for since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that people are without excuse. You know, just like David was saying, we can see the truth through what was created. It always points back to God and his wonderful design.
Amen. Absolutely. And when we look around at the awe and the wonder of creation, it absolutely shouts and screams of God's glory. So amen to that. Good spot to leave it on this edition of the Quick Start Podcast. As always, get yourself on over to cbnnews.com and faithwire.com for more news from a Christian perspective. God bless. See you back here tomorrow.